The electrical storm painted Haven 9's sky in shades of violet and azure, casting eerie shadows across the colony's biodomes. Lyra Winters stood at her monitoring station, dark eyes fixed on the holographic weather patterns swirling above her workstation. Something about these storms didn't make sense. They were too organized, too precise in their devastation. Weather control to Sector 7. She spoke into her comm unit, voice steady despite the concern gnawing at her gut. You've got another convergence pattern forming. Get those lightning rods calibrated. The response came through garbled, static crackling like the lightning outside. Through the reinforced windows of the control tower, she watched as another bolt struck the colony's outer shields, the energy dispersion systems struggling to cope with the raw power. That's when she noticed him, a tall figure in environmental gear, moving with unusual grace through the storm-swept plaza below. No one should be out in this weather. The electrical activity made the colony's protective shields unreliable at best, deadly at worst. Yet there he was, seemingly unconcerned by the danger. Lyra cursed under her breath. Control tower to unknown individual in Sector 4 Plaza. You need to clear the area immediately. Shield integrity is compromised in your sector. The figure paused, looking up toward her tower. Even from this distance, she could see the faint bioluminescent markings that marked him as non-human, probably one of the celestial sphere species, though she couldn't identify which one. He made no move to seek shelter. "Damn it," she muttered, grabbing her own environmental suit from its wall mount. Someone had to get that fool inside before they ended up as a cautionary tale in the colony's safety briefings. The storm hit her full force as she emerged from the tower's airlock. The suit's sensors screamed warnings about electrical activity, but she pushed forward. Years of studying Haven 9's weather patterns had taught her how to read the storms, how to move between the moments of danger. "Hey," she called out, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "You need to get inside. These storms aren't like anything you've seen before." The stranger turned toward her, and Lyra felt her breath catch. Behind his environment suit's faceplate, his features were elegantly alien, silver-scaled skin that seemed to reflect the lightning, eyes like liquid mercury. He smiled, an expression both familiar and utterly foreign. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying a musical quality that cut through the storm's chaos, "these storms are exactly what I came to see." His Haven 9 common was perfect, but carried an accent she couldn't place. Another lightning bolt struck nearby, the thunder immediate and deafening. Lyra grabbed his arm without thinking. "Fascinating. You can admire them from inside, where you won't end up as a conductor." He allowed her to pull him toward the tower, though she had the distinct impression it was more out of curiosity than concern for his safety. "You understand them, don't you?" he asked as they walked. "The patterns. They're not random." Lyra nearly stumbled. She'd been analyzing the storm data for weeks, trying to convince her superiors that something was off. But no one else had seen it. "How did you?" A massive lightning bolt struck the plaza behind them, close enough that Lyra felt her suit's electrical shielding strain. The stranger moved with incredible speed, pulling her behind a structural column as the energy discharged around them. His body sheltered hers, and for a moment she felt an odd resonance, like static electricity, but deeper, more purposeful. When the danger passed, he stepped back, those mercury eyes studying her with newfound interest. "I apologize. I should have introduced myself. I'm Nexthor. I'm an atmospheric scientist, here to study Haven 9's unique weather patterns." "Lyra Winters, Weather Control," she replied automatically, mind racing. The celestial sphere rarely sent scientists to human colonies. Something big was happening, and this mysterious alien seemed to know more than he was saying. The storm intensified around them, lightning now striking in coordinated patterns that defied natural law. Nexthor watched with an expression that mixed concern and fascination. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "we should continue this conversation inside. I believe we have much to discuss about these storms, and why they're being artificially generated." Lyra felt her world shift slightly on its axis. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed. How do you know that? His smile turned grim. Because my people invented the technology being used to create them, and someone has stolen it. They made it back to the control tower just as the storm reached its peak. Through the windows, Haven 9's sky had become a battlefield of light and energy. Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped into something much bigger than rogue weather patterns. She wasn't wrong. Inside the control tower, Lyra watched as Nexthor moved through her workspace with unusual familiarity. His silver-scaled fingers traced the holographic weather patterns, manipulating the data with practiced ease. The storm continued to rage outside. But here, surrounded by humming equipment and soft blue emergency lights, it felt distant. "Your monitoring systems are surprisingly sophisticated," he commented, expanding a particular dataset, "though they're missing crucial electromagnetic harmonics." Lyra leaned against her workstation, studying him. "You still haven't explained how your people's technology ended up creating artificial storms on a human colony." Nexthor's mercury eyes met hers. "The technology was never meant for this. The atmospheric harmonics were developed to heal damaged atmospheres, to restore balance to dying worlds." He paused, something like pain crossing his alien features. "My father leads the Celestial Sphere's Atmospheric Council. We discovered the theft 3 lunar cycles ago." "Your father?" Lyra straightened. "Then you're not just a scientist." "I'm both scientist and heir," he admitted, "though I prefer the former title to the latter. Politics holds little appeal compared to understanding the dance of atmospheres." A particularly violent lightning strike illuminated the tower, casting strange shadows across Nexthor's scaled skin. Lyra noticed how the bioluminescent markings along his neck pulsed in response to the electrical activity, something she'd never seen in other celestial sphere visitors. "These storms," she said, pulling up her own research data, "they're getting worse. More frequent, more powerful. At first, I thought it was just Haven 9's unusual atmospheric composition. But look at these patterns." She projected a 3-dimensional model of the last month's storm activity. Nexthor moved closer, his presence carrying that same strange resonance she'd felt outside. "They're testing the technology," he said softly, "learning its capabilities, but they don't fully understand the consequences." "What consequences?" Before he could answer, the tower's communication system crackled to life. "Weather control, this is colony security. We're picking up unusual energy signatures in your sector. Please confirm status." Lyra reached for the comm unit, but Nexthor caught her wrist. "They can't know I'm here," he whispered. "Not yet. The theft, it was an inside job. We don't know how far the corruption reaches." She should report him. Colony protocol was clear about unauthorized aliens accessing weather control systems. But something in those mercury eyes made her hesitate. "Weather control responding," she said instead. "Just some equipment feedback from the storm. Running diagnostics now. Acknowledged. Maintain regular status updates." After the comm went silent, Nexthor released her wrist. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Lyra replied. "You're going to tell me everything, starting with why these storms are really here." He nodded, moving to the window. Lightning reflected off his scales, creating patterns that reminded Lyra of the storm itself. The atmospheric harmonics don't just control weather, they can reshape entire climates. In the right hands, they're tools of restoration. In the wrong hands, they're weapons. Lyra finished, the pieces clicking into place. Haven 9 is a test run. Yes, the colony's unique atmosphere makes it ideal for experimenting with the technology, but each test destabilizes the atmospheric matrix further. He turned back to her, his expression grave. If they perfect their control, they could hold entire worlds hostage with engineered climate disasters. Lyra's mind raced through the implications. Haven 9 was just the beginning. A proof of concept for something much darker. "How long?" she asked. "How long until the damage becomes irreversible?" Next, Thor pulled up a new set of calculations, his fingers dancing through the holographic numbers. At the current rate of degradation, 3 weeks, maybe less, the harmonics are creating cascade reactions we never anticipated. Your colony's atmosphere is becoming a storm battery, storing and amplifying energy with each test. A warning alarm blared from one of the monitoring stations. Lyra rushed to check the readings, next Thor close behind her. The numbers made her blood run cold. Energy levels are spiking in all sectors. This isn't a normal test pattern. No, next Thor agreed, his bioluminescent markings pulsing rapidly. This is something else. They're not just testing anymore, they're implementing. Through the window, the storm had taken on a new quality. The lightning no longer struck randomly, but moved in coordinated waves, like an army advancing across the sky. The colony's shields flickered under the assault, sections failing and recharging in a desperate dance. "We need to stop this," Lyra said, already moving to her emergency protocols. "Whatever they're planning." "We will," next Thor interrupted. "But not from here. I know where they're controlling this from, but reaching it." He hesitated. "It will mean trusting me completely. And what I'm about to suggest breaks about a dozen celestial sphere laws." Lyra looked at her monitors, at the data showing her colony's atmosphere tearing itself apart, then back at this alien prince who had walked into her storm. "Good thing I only enforce Haven 9 laws then." His answering smile was like lightning, brilliant and dangerous. "How are you with heights?" "This is insane," Lyra muttered, checking the seals on her modified environmental suit for the 3rd time. She and next Thor stood in the tower's maintenance airlock, preparing to step out onto Haven 9's orbital tether, a massive structure that connected the colony to its space elevator. "The facility controlling the harmonics is hidden in plain sight," next Thor explained, making adjustments to his own suit. "Built into the tether itself, about 3 kilometers up, high enough to affect the entire colony's atmosphere, but low enough to avoid orbital monitoring." The storm had intensified further, turning the sky into a seething mass of purple-tinged clouds. Lightning arced between them in complex geometric patterns that made Lyra's scientific mind rebel against their impossibility. "The tether's maintenance crawlers are too obvious," she said, pulling up the structure's schematics on her suit's display. "They'll be watching those." Next Thor's mercury eyes gleamed. "We're not taking a crawler." He held up what looked like a small silver disc. "My people have other ways of moving through storms." Before Lyra could ask what he meant, he pressed the disc against her suit's power core. Energy rippled across her armor, and suddenly she felt lighter, more connected to the electrical field surrounding them. "Atmospheric resonance technology," he explained. "We'll ride the storm itself. The lightning will see us as part of its pattern." "That's..." Lyra searched for the right word. "Terrifying." His laugh was surprisingly warm. "Trust your instincts. The storm speaks to you. I've seen how you read its patterns. That's why I knew I could trust you. Few humans have that sensitivity." The airlock cycled, and the full fury of Haven 9's engineered tempest hit them. But instead of the expected buffeting, Lyra felt an odd harmony with the electrical fields. Her suit hummed in resonance with the storm, creating a bubble of calm around them. "Stay close," next Thor called over their comlink. "The resonance field works better when we're together." They began their ascent up the tether's maintenance ladder. Under normal circumstances, climbing an exposed structure during an electrical storm would be suicide. But with next Thor's technology, the lightning seemed to curve around them, creating safe passages through the chaos. As they climbed higher, Lyra noticed something odd about the storm's pattern. "The lightning," she said. "It's not just random testing anymore. These are defense protocols. They're protecting something." "You see it too." Next Thor sounded pleased. "The harmonics create distinct signatures. These patterns, they're military grade. Whoever stole our technology has friends in high places." They passed the 1-kilometer mark, the colony now spread out below them like a web of lights in the storm. The wind should have been devastating at this height, but their resonance field continued to protect them. Suddenly, Nexthor grabbed her arm. Wait. His bioluminescent markings were pulsing rapidly. Something's wrong. The patterns are shifting. Lyra saw it too. The geometric lightning formations were collapsing, reforming into something new, something aggressive. They've detected us. The storm exploded into violence. Lightning no longer avoided them, but actively sought their position. Their resonance field crackled under the assault. Hold on. Nexthor pulled her close, their suits connecting with a spark of energy. The storm raged around them, but where their fields overlapped, they were stronger. We need to move faster. The facility is just above us. They abandoned the ladder, using their resonance fields to literally surf the electrical currents upward. Lyra's scientific mind cataloged everything, even as her heart raced at the impossibility of what they were doing. The storm wasn't just weather anymore, it was a living thing, and they were dancing through its neural network. At 2.5 kilometers, they found it, a hidden access hatch, barely visible against the tether surface. But they weren't alone. "Welcome, Your Highness," a voice crackled over their comm system. I wondered when the celestial sphere would figure it out. Armed figures emerged from concealed positions around them, wearing suits that pulsed with the same resonance technology as theirs. Their leader's face was hidden behind a polarized faceplate, but his voice carried familiar aristocratic tones. "Counselor Vexthan," Nexthor growled. "I should have known. The military patterns, they're your signature." "The atmospheric council has grown weak," Vexthan replied. "Healing dying worlds. We should be controlling them. Think of it. Entire civilizations at the mercy of their own atmosphere. True power isn't in politics, young prince. It's in fear." Lightning crashed around them, no longer avoiding anyone. The storm was becoming unstable, the competing resonance fields creating chaos in the atmospheric matrix. The harmonics weren't designed for this level of manipulation. Nexthor shouted over the growing thunder. "You're going to tear Haven 9's atmosphere apart." "A necessary demonstration," Vexthan said calmly. "Though I'm afraid you won't be alive to see the results." The storm cell above them began to rotate, forming a vortex of electrical energy. Lyra's instruments screamed warnings about atmospheric instability. They were out of time. She looked at Nexthor, saw the same realization in his mercury eyes. Without words, they made their choice. Their resonance fields merged completely, creating something new, something neither human nor celestial sphere technology had ever achieved alone. The storm responded, and a real fight began. The storm became a battlefield. Lightning curved and danced around them as Lyra and Nexthor's merged resonance field fought against Vexthan's military-grade harmonics, 3 kilometers above Haven 9. With the colony's fate hanging in the balance, human intuition and celestial sphere technology created something unprecedented. Their resonance patterns, Lyra called out, watching how Vexthan's forces moved through the storm. They're predictable, military precision, but no adaptation. Nexthor's scaled hands moved in concert with hers, their combined field pulsing with each defensive maneuver. Military training values consistency. But storms, he grinned, mercury eyes flashing. Storms are chaos. They move like dancers through the electrical maelstrom, their unpredictable patterns confounding the rigid military formations. Where Vexthan's people fought the storm, Lyra and Nexthor became part of it, letting the natural chaos of the atmosphere guide their movements. "Impossible," Vexthan's voice crackled over the comm. "The harmonics can't be controlled without proper military protocols." "That's your mistake," Nexthor replied, his bioluminescent markings pulsing in sync with the lightning around them. "We're not controlling it. We're working with it." A massive electrical discharge scattered Vexthan's forces, their rigid formation breaking apart. But the victory was short-lived. Above them, the atmospheric matrix was beginning to collapse. The competing resonance fields had created too much instability. The containment field is failing, Lyra reported, checking her suit's readings. If those harmonics overload, the entire atmosphere will ignite. Next, Thor finished. We need to get inside that facility. Now. They made their move, using the chaos of the deteriorating storm as cover. Vexthen's forces were too busy fighting the increasingly erratic lightning to stop them from reaching the hidden access hatch. But as Next Thor worked to override the security protocols, Lyra noticed something in her atmospheric readings that made her blood run cold. Next Thor, she said, voice tight. The harmonic frequencies. They're building toward a cascade reaction. He looked at the data, his mercury eyes widening. They're not just testing the technology. This was their plan all along. Total atmospheric combustion. Haven 9 would serve as proof of the weapon's effectiveness. The access hatch finally yielded, revealing a narrow airlock. As they cycled through, Lyra's mind raced through calculations. How long? 20 minutes, maybe less. Next, Thor's scaled fingers flew over the airlock's internal controls. Once the cascade begins, there's no stopping it. The entire colony. The inner door opened to reveal a sophisticated control center built into the tether structure. Holographic displays showed the deteriorating atmospheric conditions, and in the center, a device hummed with familiar resonance energy. The stolen harmonic technology. Step away from the controls. Vex then stood at the opposite entrance, surrounded by armed guards. He'd removed his helmet, revealing features similar to Next Thor's but harder, colder. You're too late to stop it. Haven 9's destruction will prove that no world is beyond our reach. Why? Next Thor demanded. You're supposed to protect our technology, not turn it into a weapon. Protection. Vex then laughed. The celestial sphere has grown soft, using our greatest achievements to coddle dying worlds. True power comes from fear. When the galaxy sees what happened here, they'll understand. They'll submit. Lyra had stopped listening. Her attention was fixed on the harmonic device, watching how its energy pulsed in patterns that seemed almost familiar. Next Thor, she whispered. The resonance field we created. It wasn't just defensive, was it? He caught her meaning immediately. Two different approaches to the same technology. Military precision versus natural harmony. Exactly. Her fingers twitched toward her suit's controls. What happens when you introduce chaos into a rigid system? A slight smile curved his scaled lips. It adapts or it breaks. He turned to Vexthen, who was still monologuing about power and control. You forgot something, counselor, about human colonies. And what's that? Vexthen sneered. They're really good at surviving chaos. Moving in perfect sync, Lyra and Next Thor activated their resonance fields at full power. The harmonic device responded immediately, its military protocols conflicting with their more organic approach. Energy cascaded through the facility as two fundamentally different philosophies of atmospheric control clashed. No, Vex then lunged for the controls, but it was too late. The storm outside had become a tempest of competing energies. Through the facility's windows, they could see lightning forming impossible patterns as military precision fought against natural chaos. The entire atmospheric matrix of Haven 9 hung in the balance. And in the middle of it all, a human weather controller and a celestial sphere prince held onto each other, their combined resonance field growing stronger as everything else fell apart. They had one chance to save the colony, but it would mean breaking every rule of both their worlds. Sometimes, Lyra thought as she looked into Next Thor's mercury eyes, that's exactly what storms were for. The atmosphere of Haven 9 had become a war zone of competing energies. Military precision fought against natural chaos as Lyra and Next Thor's merged resonance field challenged Vexthen's rigid protocols. The stolen harmonic device pulsed between them, its power fluctuating as it tried to reconcile two fundamentally different approaches to atmospheric control. You'll destroy everything. Vex then shouted, his guards moving to surround them. The harmonics weren't designed to handle this level of deviation. No, Next Thor replied, his scaled fingers intertwined with Lyra's as they maintained their field. They were designed to heal. You turned them into weapons, but that was never their true purpose. Lyra watched the atmospheric readings, her mind racing through possibilities. The cascade reaction is still building, but the pattern is changing. Look at the energy distribution. She was right. Where Vexthan's military protocols had created rigid, destructive patterns, their combined resonance was introducing something new. The storm was no longer just responding to commands. It was adapting, finding its own balance between order and chaos. Impossible, Vexthan breathed, watching his carefully constructed weapon transform. The harmonics require precise control. Control isn't the same as harmony, Lyra said, understanding flooding through her. You tried to force the atmosphere to obey. We're letting it find its own path. The facility shook as another wave of energy pulsed through Haven 9's atmospheric matrix. But this time, instead of contributing to the cascade reaction, the energy began to disperse in new patterns. Natural patterns. Next Thor's bioluminescent markings pulsed with growing intensity. The original harmonic protocols, they're reasserting themselves. The atmosphere is healing itself. No. Vex then lunged for the control panel, but his own guards held him back. They too had seen the difference between true harmony and forced control. You're throwing away our chance at real power. Power. Next Thor's mercury eyes flashed. Look outside, counselor. That's real power. Through the facility's windows, the storm was transforming. The violent, military-precise lightning had given way to something beautiful. Energy flowed in natural curves and spirals, the atmosphere of Haven 9 finding its own balance between order and chaos. It was like watching a symphony conduct itself. The cascade reaction. Lyra checked her readings, a smile spreading across her face. It's reversing. The harmonics are actually repairing the atmospheric damage. Alert weather control. She called to the facility's communication system. Tell them to stand down emergency protocols. The storm is stabilizing. Vex then slumped in his guard's grip, watching his weapon of fear transform into exactly what it was meant to be, a tool of healing and renewal. The celestial sphere will never allow this, he muttered. Humans aren't supposed to have access to harmonic technology. Maybe that's exactly what the technology needed, Next Thor said, looking at Lyra with something that went beyond mere admiration. Someone who could see storms not as things to be controlled, but as patterns to be understood. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Celestial Sphere peacekeepers arrived to take Vexthan into custody. Haven 9's officials demanded explanations. But through it all, Lyra and Next Thor remained focused on stabilizing the colony's atmosphere, their merged resonance field growing stronger with each passing moment. As the last traces of the military harmonics faded from Haven 9's skies, they stood together in the weather control tower, watching their combined work paint the clouds in colors neither of them had seen before. The Atmospheric Council will want answers, Next Thor said finally. This changes everything we thought we knew about harmonic technology. Are you in trouble? Lyra asked, remembering his position as heir to the council. His laugh was warm. Quite the opposite. I proved that the harmonics could work in ways we never imagined. And he turned to her, mercury eyes soft. I found someone who understands storms the way I do. What happens now? She gestured to the newly stabilized atmosphere, where traces of their merged resonance still painted patterns across the sky. Now, Next Thor smiled, taking her hand. I believe Haven 9 needs a joint atmospheric research initiative, something to explore the combination of human intuition and celestial sphere technology. Interested in a new job? Lyra looked at their joined hands, at the way his bioluminescent markings pulsed in sync with the lingering energy patterns above the colony. Will it involve more impossible storms? With us? His scaled fingers tightened gently around hers. Always. Outside, the last traces of the military harmonics faded away, replaced by something new, a perfect blend of natural chaos and gentle order. Haven Nine's atmosphere had found its harmony, just as its unlikely guardians had found theirs. Some storms, after all, were worth braving together.